There's a certain tree that grows natively in an area not far from here. It grows along the Red River Basin and up into southeastern Oklahoma and the western half of Arkansas. It's a sort of tree you may have seen before without knowing its name. It's called the Osage orange tree. It was named for the indigenous Osage people who cherished these trees and sometimes traveled hundreds of miles through the river valleys to collect its wood for their hunting bows. But when we encounter the Osage orange trees today, what we're most likely to notice is not the tree's wood, but its fruit. The fruit is bright green and bumpy, the size of a large softball or a small melon. We call them oranges, but they bear little resemblance to the citrus fruits we Americans eat by the ton every year. These Osage oranges are full of seeds. Their thick, spongy pith is soaked in an inedible and unappetizing, milky latex. Animals don't eat them, and humans have found no real use for them, so the fruit of the Osage orange trees fall to the ground in late autumn and lie there, unclaimed and untouched at the base of the tree. The best that one of these trees can hope for in their lives is that one of its oranges will roll downhill a little bit, gaining at least a few feet of distance from its parent before breaking down and depositing its seeds in the earth. This is why today these trees are only found clustered in tight groupings at the bottoms of hills along the winding Red River Valley. But it wasn't always this way. The scientists who study the ancient lives of plants, we call them paleoethnobotanists, have discovered well-preserved Osage orange tree fossils dating back to around 13,000 years ago. And these fossils can be found hundreds of miles away from the river valleys of Texas and Oklahoma, as far north as Ontario, Canada. And back then, there were a half dozen more species than the one we're familiar with, a wide and thriving range of Osage orange trees, far more genetically and geographically diverse than the small and shrinking collection that survives here in Texas. So what happened? Why is this species of tree, which once flourished across a continent, now restricted to such a small geographic area? And why is it genetically impoverished compared to what it once was? And moreover, how could the clever and ambitious forces of plant evolution have ever produced a tree whose seeds are produced in a large fruit that requires such an enormous amount of biological resources and which can only propagate by rolling downhill into ever darker and more cramped corners of river valleys, increasingly distant from the nourishing sunlight of higher ground? How did that ever happen? The answer, as it turns out, is that the Osage orange evolved in partnership. It evolved hand in hand with creatures that are no longer here. Its evolutionary development took place during the last great ice age into the Pleistocene era, 13 to 15,000 years ago. And as those trees developed, they did so in partnership with the animals that lived in North America at that time. Now, most of the mammals that lived then are still around and known to us, with just one major exception: the family of animals that scientists call the megafauna. These are the giant species of animals that roamed the continent during the Pleistocene. You will have heard of some of them, like the woolly mammoths and the giant sloths. But there were also camels in North America at that time, alongside the mastodons. There was a kind of armadillo that grew up to 600 pounds, and something called a glyptodont that looks like a giant turtle but could weigh 2,000 pounds. There were 3 species of large bears, including the giant 1,800-pound short-faced bear, the largest mammalian predator that ever walked on Earth. Today, all the megafauna are gone, except for a rare few that remain in North America: the mountain goats and bison, the elk and moose, mule deer, black bears, and grizzlies. All the rest are gone. And among those that have vanished, are the mammoths and giant sloths that loved the taste of Osage oranges. They ate them with great delight, boundless appetites, consuming their spongy flesh and carrying their seeds uphill and into the sun, where they would be deposited along with some organic small batch fertilizer in spots far away from the parent tree, where they could germinate and give life to new trees. Although today the trees are restricted to the small and tramped territory along the Red River, our friends, the paleoethnobotanists, tell us that the range along which their ancient fossils are found follows precisely the arcing migratory paths of the mastodons and great sloths. A giant sweeping crescent of land from central Louisiana all the way up to the plains of Ontario and Manitoba. But when the great extinctions swept through North America and the animals disappeared, the range of the Osage orange shrank, steadily and gradually, contracting to tiny clusters in north-central Texas. Those trees still survive here, but they survive in a state of perpetual yearning. In a sense, the trees remember a world that no longer exists. The trees miss the mammoths, although none of these particular trees have ever known a mammoth in their lives. The Osage orange still bears the shape of a relationship that has been lost. And that, as it turns out, is not so far from where we find ourselves today. On this Passover, this holiday that places us in a position of yearning and longing and memory that exists at some untouchable genetic level inside us, even though our lives today are so very different from the one that produced us spiritually. At our seder, as we play the roles of freed slaves, reclining at our dinner tables, doing what we can to feel the oppression of slavery, though we ourselves are physically comfortable, financially secure, and politically liberated. We eat matzah to remind us of our ancestors' sojourn in the desert when their bread didn't have time to rise, even though the matzah we eat today is perfectly rectangular, machine-made, produced and shipped in spotless, climate-controlled facilities. But still in us are preserved the records of fossilized Jewish history. As practitioners of Passover, the festival of liberation that our predecessors experienced thousands of years ago, we carry the memory of a past we did not live, but which has shaped us nonetheless. And then on this day, those of us who mourn, who offer these prayers of Yizkor, we add another layer of memory as we offer the prayers of memory and loss. We gather not only as a people of inherited memory, but as individuals who carry very real memories of those we have loved and lost. We carry them inside us, our parents and our partners, our siblings, our friends, our children. Some of us are here in this service for the first time, trying to navigate a wholly new and unfamiliar terrain, strange and unknown territory we've heard about but never inhabited. Some of us have been mourners for many years but are still groping our way forward one step at a time through a landscape that still doesn't feel like home. All of us are carrying the memories of our loved ones, gripping them tightly as we try to make ourselves at home in a strange new land where they are not. In the letters that we have of Emily Dickinson, one of them is a card she wrote to a friend when Dickinson was preparing to move into a new house. She wrote to her friend, "I am out with lanterns looking for myself." And Yizkor morning, that line feels painfully true. We have all come here bringing our own lanterns, holding them up to memory, to fragments of voices and gestures, to moments that come to the surface uninvited. In the light of those lanterns, we trace the outlines of the people who shaped us and who carried us, who loved us and walked beside us. We are out with lanterns, looking for ourselves, seeking light in a place left dark by the absence of those we loved. There is a kind of spiritual archaeology at this time of year. Together we run our fingers over the fossilized past, not to excavate it completely because we cannot, but to recognize its imprints and feel its contours. We return to our small, precious artifacts. A phrase our loved one used to say, the way they took their coffee or their scrambled eggs, a habit we have inherited from them, a value we hold without quite knowing when it became ours. And today we know these are not relics of a vanished time, they are living elements of who we are. The disappearance of the great megafauna reshaped the world of the Osage orange, and the absence of those we love reshapes our emotional landscape, our sense of direction, our capacity for movement. We are living in a world that is at once familiar and entirely altered. Sometimes, like those trees, we feel as though we are living in a habitat that has been restricted, in a range of movement tightened and narrowed, especially perhaps when we remember that when they were with us, our lives had a wider range, a broader horizon. But our lives are not limited to what we were in the past, and neither are the trees. The Osage orange trees didn't disappear after all. They're still here, continuing to root themselves in the earth and produce their strange and stubborn fruit. Their stubborn survival reminding us that even when a relationship is no longer physically present, its imprint endures. That memory, even when nearly eclipsed by an overwhelming absence, still remains as a sort of presence. And so these prayers of Yizkor, the sacred pause in which we allow ourselves to remember not only who our beloved dead once were, but who we are today because of them. We take this time to run our fingers across the geologic strata of our lives and notice the ways in which their voices echo in our own, the way their values guide our instincts, the way their love shapes our capacity to love and to be loved by others. We're not who we were when they were with us, but we are also not who we would have been if they had not been part of our lives. Like the Osage orange trees, we live in the afterlife of relationships that once carried us farther than we could go on our own. And even now, even in their absence, we carry them with us as we continue growing and unfolding. This is the blessing of this time of year and these prayers of Yizkor, that the practice of memory is not done only by looking backward, but by using our grief as a medium to clarify our awareness of what remains, what still survives in us, and in the hopeful fruit our lives still bear. For in our quiet work of remembering, in the sacred labor of spiritual archaeology, we come to see more clearly not only who they were, but who we are still becoming.